Briefly, the conflicts can basically be divided into 4 categories. There are the morsel conflicts, the attack conflict, the self-devaluation conflicts, and the territorial and separation conflicts. The whole thing has to do with our developmental history. How this development took place, whether after Darwin or otherwise, is not the topic here. Our ancestors swam through the sea in a kind of ring shape. At this stage, life was about archaic things like picking up and giving away morsels. These morsel conflicts are found in the oldest part of our brain, the brainstem. At some point, this ancestor came to land and skin developed to protect the individual. The attack conflicts are controlled by the cerebellum. Then the musculoskeletal system developed for the purpose of locomotion on land. The associated drops in self-devaluation lie in the cerebral medulla. The last is the youngest part of our brain, the cerebral cortex. Social coexistence is regulated here. Logically, the territorial and separation conflicts can also be found here. Mother Nature usually tries to support the individual with all her SPS. There is only one exception in the cerebral cortex. This exception is the so-called territory areas. There is a male and a female territory. The territory areas consist on 5 relays, each on the left and right side in the cerebral cortex. If the territorial areas are each occupied by at least one conflict, it is no longer just about supporting the individual, but about living together within the community. Depending on the combination of these 10 possible assignable relays, this results in certain abilities, but also behavioral problems. Dr. Hamer calls these possible combinations territory constellations. Here we find the autistic, the gunman, borderliner, homosexual, nymphomaniac, esoteric, gossip, character assassin, goss, and. The meaning of the constellation lies in certain abilities of these constellations for the community. The autistic person spends an infinite amount of time doing just one thing. He tinkers and develops something new, something that makes life easier for the community. The bioaggressive runs amok and, if necessary, defends the community like a berserker. The mythomaniac provides the group's entertainment, etc. The one who has no territorial conflict is an alpha male or an alpha female. The alphas use the properties of the constellations for the benefit of the community. The constellations therefore serve biological harmonious coexistence. Dr. Hamer calls the behavior and abilities of the constellations the biological supersense. Today it will be about the flyer constellation. Regarding the theory, I refer to the literature of Dr. Hamer and Helmut Pilar's videos on the topic. They can be found in the appendix. In the flyer constellation, the bronchial mucosal relay is occupied in the male territory and the laryngeal mucosal relay in the female. If the male side is emphasized, we see the depressive flyer. If the female side is emphasized, we see the manic flyer. If the emphasis changes back and forth, we have the manic-depressive flyer. The typical flyer is the esoteric or guru. If I offend anyone with my choice of words below, I would like to apologize in advance. A more grounded person like me finds it difficult to understand the esoteric, and it is certainly the same the other way around. Of course, both behaviors have their biological meaning. The flyer sets off for new shores. He is drawn high up into a higher dimension. So to speak, he flies to the stars and beyond. He thinks outside the box and therefore thinks he knows more than others. This can make him appear aloof and arrogant. He is reluctant to solve everyday problems and prefers to put them off. He doesn't bother with such mundane things because he is intended for higher things. The flyer is susceptible to the greatest intellectual ideas of a guru. They seem logical and clear to him, whereas real, verifiable things seems more foreign to him. The flyer likes to ignore everything, standing above things, so to speak, detached. For him, people in earlier times could fly. He is going to be an astronaut or at least a pilot. The manic flyer can actually fly in dreams. It pulls him up, whereas the depressed flyer is pulled down. He dreams of crashing and descending. Flyers can detach from their bodies during near-death experiences. They can look at these terrible events from outside, and instead of feeling pain, they experience pleasant feelings in the situation. In my experience in Germanische Heilkunde, you come into a lot of contact with flyers. At first, they are always excited when they hear about the Germanische Heilkunde. But they find it difficult to understand it, and soon Dr. Harmer is too little for them. Harmer has certainly not discovered everything. Harmer has only discovered a partial area. There's much more, etc. These are the same typical sentences that I have heard countless times. If you don't agree with the flyer, the typical final sentence is, "You're just not ready yet." Or he ennobles a supporter standing by who agrees with him with the words, "XY is already much further along than you." Flyer therefore further develops Germanische Heilkunde due to the constellation. Suddenly there is a higher level SBS before DHS, and the woman has her breast cancer not because the child is injured in the hospital, but because an ancestor did something evil in the 15th century. The person who came up with these sometimes dangerous quotation marks further developments becomes a guru and earns quite a bit of money from his followers. The catch, however, is that natural laws cannot, of course, be developed further. You can only live with them. I will probably never be able to understand the flyer. But since then I have known that the biological supersense of this constellation lies in discovery for the community. I can laugh heartily with the flyers in my study circles about our different constellations. If the flyer also has the motor bronchial and laryngeal relays involved and he goes into epicrisis with both at the same time, he will have a simultaneous seizure of the bronchial and larynx muscles. This crisis is called status asthmaticus, and depending on the extent of the conflict, it can become life-threatening. The song played at the beginning comes from Peter Schilling. Floating, flying, high, low, speed of light, fifth dimension, all elements of the flying constellation are there. His biggest hit was the astronaut song Major Tom. Completely detached from the Earth, the spaceship floats, weightless. Yes, and his second biggest was the doom hit Terra Titanic. Terra Titanic deals with the complete opposite. The final destination for the sinking ship is the bottom of the ocean. Peter Schilling describes the manic and depressive constellations very accurately in his songs. You can read about Peter Schilling that he had a near-death experience in 1989. I quote, "At Lake Wörthersee he struggles for air and collapses. Doctors call this an attack of suffocation status asthmaticus. My life was playing backwards in front of me. It was wonderful. I didn't want to go back at all." Schilling had status asthmaticus, i.e. both flyer relays were in crisis. So from the perspective of Germanische Heilkunde, he was a flyer, and that is basically confirmed by his texts. Of course, we don't know where he caught the DHS. You can read about his childhood that it wasn't the happiest. He was also an orphanage child. I found the following quote. "To this day, the sound of jingling keys disturbs him. As a child, he knew my mother would come back, cold-hearted, possibly drunk and violent." Yeah, the jingling key is a track. Schilling was 12 when she tried to kill herself with sleeping pills. He only reads this sentence from his father. He couldn't acknowledge paternity and had lost track of who he had slept with. Then the father disappears to his homeland, Iran. Schilling survived the life-threatening situation, the near-death experience of status asthmaticus. It would be interesting to know whether he permanently emerged from the flyer constellation afterwards. Then his behavior must have changed too, because when the constellation is gone, the biological supersense is also gone and sees the world with different eyes. Whatever. His legendary catchy tune, Major Tom, has now been chosen as the goal anthem of the German national football team. I don't know whether the general public is ready yet, but perhaps the excitement of floating will inspire them to set out on their own and discover new territory, for example, Germanische Heilkunde.